Hello, my name is Mark Taylor, and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents, and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best, authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. I love the ability to have conversations which directly help people and just to realise that we don't all live in a world of mainstream education. We don't all live in the same world. We have people around us that have all sorts of needs. And I hope today is going to help and support many people in many different ways. So, yeah, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So for those people who haven't come across Deaf Choices UK before, tell us a sort of a brief sort of background in terms of what you do and then your role in it.
So Deaf Choices UK was actually only formed last December 2023, but formally it was known as Cued Speech UK, which has been going in this country since, well, about 45 years ago. And cued speech itself originated in America in the 1960s and then was brought over here some years later. So yes, it's a charity that's about 45 years old in this country, but Deaf Choices is a whole new thing. It's a whole new venture that we've just started.
And so what does that look like different to what you were doing before and sort of how have you sort of integrated all that experience?
Yeah, so cued speech is a very kind of niche skill. And as a charity, it's difficult sometimes to promote just one thing in the deaf world. And actually, it's really important, we have found through experience, that deaf children and their families are given lots of choices around communication and language. And so we've kind of embraced that whole idea in our new name. And I think it's just really helpful because actually, what we've noticed over the years is that all deaf children are different. That's no big surprise, I guess. But, you know, they're going to need different things. And
And
so
yeah.
that's what we're trying to promote.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I guess the other thing is the fact that when parents are coming to you and they're looking for support and help and guidance, I guess they don't really mind what the outcomes and the help actually looks like as long as it's giving the information and the skills that are needed. And so, like I say, having that sort of sense that they feel like they're stepping into a situation and an environment where things are going to be supportive. Say what particular program it is, what particular piece of support that happens to be is further down the line than that sort of initial feeling of what you're entering into.
Yes, and I think, you know, it's a baffling world to land into, the world of the deaf. And for most parents, are hearing parents of a deaf child. 9 out of 10 are born to hearing parents. And so it's a really difficult place to be when you just don't know anything. You don't know what the outcome might be for your child. You don't know what the technology looks like. You don't know what the communication choices are. You just don't know anything. And it's quite an extraordinary place to find yourself in, and hopefully we really help to provide the choices that parents need.
So take us into, and I know this is probably depending on how long a piece of string is, but in terms of the sort of the age of a child, and then relative to when the parents might sort of come to you and ask for support, and then what different types of support are there in place, sort of relative to that?
So generally, parents get to know about their child's deafness early because of the newborn hearing screen test that happens very, very early on. So if there's been a problem with that, then more testing occurs afterwards. So usually by 3 months or 6 months, parents actually have a diagnosis of deafness. So really, we like to try and see parents as soon as we can in order for them to understand the difficulties that they're going to face with their child and how they can overcome those difficulties. So, what we provide are home visits so that we can get to know the family, get to, start to experience their journey with them, and to explain what's out there, and for them to understand what sign language is, what cued speech is, what hearing aids are going to do, what a cochlear implant process might look like.
And so, can you just explain a little bit more about how some of that process for each of those might be? Because I guess it's certainly from someone from the outside who's not had this sort of experience before. It can be, the idea of learning sign language is something maybe which I've heard of, but then, like say, the different ideas of hearing aids or, like say, or cued speech and that kind of thing is something I wouldn't necessarily know. So, just sort of walk us through that in sort of basic terms to begin with.
Okay, so initially, what we have is a diagnosis of some kind of deafness. So that could be anything from a mild loss through to a severe to profound loss. So if we're talking about a mild loss, you're going to be missing some speech sounds, which doesn't sound like a huge big deal. But actually, if you're a baby and you're trying to understand what's going on around you and you're missing a load of sounds, that could cause some issues. And then if you're severe to profound, then you're not going to be able to access those speech sounds at all. So as you see people talking to you as a baby, you're not going to hear any of that. So that's obviously a big problem. I've forgotten the question now. What did you ask?
So just sort of related, like say, to sort of cued speech and maybe sort of the ideas of sort of different hearing aids and those things, things which people maybe would understand can be supportive, but not understand maybe the practicalities of those sorts of things.
Yes. So hearing aids is a big piece of work, because as a parent, you're going to need to go to the hospital pretty much every month, because babies' ears are so small, but they also grow. And so the ear molds that are made, they grow out of them very, very quickly. And so there are lots and lots of hospital visits. That's something that they have to be prepared for. And then they need to start to think about the kind of communication choices that there are. And so some people talk about Makaton, which is a very simplified version of sign language. It was actually invented for children with additional disabilities, but not actually for deaf children. So Makaton is really for those children that have Down syndrome, physical disabilities, where their speech is going to be delayed, and they need something in order to communicate their needs and wants.
Right.
They can hear what's going on, but they can't actually speak. So it was really designed for them. It's not really for deaf children. Sign language, BSL, is what we know about. British Sign Language is its own language in its entirety. It's a pictorial language. So what that means is that it is entirely different from English. What do I mean by that? So we take an English message and we turn it into pictures. So I'm going to do a little bit of signing now. For those of you who are on audio, apologies for that. But if I was to give you a pictorial message of the man threw the ball, okay, I'm going to sign it in English word order. So the man threw the ball. But actually, in that picture, I'm still holding it. Okay? So in sign language, it would be man, ball, throw. Now you have a picture of what's actually happening. But in there is no English grammar, and the word order has changed. So when people learn British Sign Language, they're learning lots of signs like cat, dog, mouse, door, window, thank you, please, all those things. But actually, when it comes to constructing a message, you're constructing a picture, not an English sentence. So lots of people don't understand that. So we have to go through that. And then cued speech is the English language. And so what that is 8 different hand shapes, and I'll just demonstrate them for those of you who are watching. So these are the hand shapes, I'm just running through them. They hold the consonant sounds, and we have 24 of those in the English language. And then when I put my hand, oh, I'm going to hit my microphone. Use my other hand. Mouth, chin, throat, and side. They are where we show the vowel sounds. So once you've learnt the system, you can cue as you speak. And for those of you on audio, I've just cued that in real time. So what you're seeing is that are all the sounds in that sentence. I can cue. So there you then have a picture of all the sounds that are being used in an English sentence. And the idea is that actually you can cue to a baby, and you cue just as you hold them and chat to them. I love you, peekaboo, all those kind of things. You can cue those in real time to your deaf baby. And what then happens is that the deaf baby can see the sounds they can't hear, and amazingly, the brain turns that into sound in their heads. So the incredible thing then is that they can begin to think in a sound language that they can't actually hear.
That really is incredible, and I think the way I can relate to that is just the fact that when you are a parent of a young child, I think when you're just starting from the point of view, just sort of sharing information in a way that you forget about the learning process and you're just kind of doing it, whether you're counting steps going upstairs or, like say, you're pointing things out and talking in an normal sort of auditory way. As long as you, like say, you get the diagnosis early enough and you actually know how you can go about it, the process and the way you are with your child is going to be pretty much the same, I would imagine, because you're just communicating in a way which you know is going to be helpful and supportive based on the information that you've given.
Yes, and also for those hearing parents, they want to give their child the English language because that's their first language. And in fact, actually, you can cue in many, many other languages as well, but we'll come to that at some point. But, you know, you want to be able to communicate everything about what's going on around you. That's what we do, isn't it, with babies? And actually, for deaf babies, if they're being cued to, they can see what's being communicated. Whereas, you know, for hearing children, they just absorb it because it's happening around them. But a deaf baby can do the same with their sight if they're being cued to.
And how do you find, like we sort of talked about that sort of practical support and everything as well? Do you sort of offer that sort of more social and personal support as well? Because it must be a trying time for parents when they're sort of, they think their life's going to look in a certain way, and then of course it's very different once they realise that their baby may be deaf.
Yeah, it's a huge shock to find out that your child is deaf. And for sure, you know, there's a lot of talk about sharing those grief emotions, really, because nobody expects anything to be wrong with their child. You know, we have children, we expect them to be healthy, and to have anything go wrong is a huge shock. And so there is a grieving process to that. And we're very, very aware of that in our charity. And we do aim to support those parents as they go through that process of grieving, and then also helping them to be solution focused to really help their child develop.
And I guess it also has an implication from a family point of view, because it may well be you have other children who are hearing, and so it sort of puts a different slant on the overall environment of the house, as well as sort of the practicalities maybe of what you thought family life would be like in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, or, like you say, solutions and ways of adapting that might be needed in terms of making family life look a new way because of the situation that you find yourself in.
That's absolutely right. And of course, we really do aim to help the whole family in our visits so that, yes, I am teaching them how to cue, but then I'm also teaching them how to cue to their child in various situations and how to involve the other family members. And sometimes it's other family members that also learn to cue as well. So I've supported a family for a couple of years now who live in Perth, Australia, and the whole family have learnt to cue to their the youngest member of the family, who is now 6, I think. But she's been cued to for the last 3 years since she acquired deafness through meningitis. And so the whole family have learnt to cue. And so she's completely surrounded by language all the time. And that's the language of the home and all the different things that are happening around the dinner table or in the lounge or as they go out to the park or wherever it is. The whole family are involved.
And I guess this brings up a great point in terms of who is it that you support, because talking about someone in Australia wasn't something which I would have immediately said, sort of being a UK charity.
Yeah, so normally it is families in the UK that we support. And so for myself being in Devon, I can obviously drive around the county and see people face to face. But, also we can have families that are out of the area. I have a colleague in Newcastle and one in Hertfordshire. So we have those areas covered. But if there are other families who are interested in the support we can provide, we can do that for them online.
And is there a particular way of doing that? Is it like people would traditionally imagine a Zoom call or something like that, or are there sort of certain ways that you can do it sort of specifically for this sort of idea?
Well, really, Zoom is the platform that we generally use, but sometimes also we get parents together in small groups to meet each other, and that happened quite a bit during the pandemic. That was a really useful way of families coming together just to share some of their experiences too. So that's all possible, and Zoom's a great platform for that.
Yeah, because I guess the isolation is one of those things. Because certainly, sort of from my time as a parent, that kind of you have your child, you're going to nursery, play groups, those sorts of things, and you're sort of always sort of finding out what other people are doing and what their situations are like. And so, if there's a very different situation, because well, specifically in terms of being deaf, like we're talking about today, that sort of relationship and the stories that you're going to share are going to be different with people who maybe don't have the same experiences as you.
Yeah, that's right. And another thing that we do run for parents is a 6-week course called Choices. And that is very much about exploring again the deaf world. Who are you going to meet? Who are those professionals that are going to help you? What does an audiogram look like? What is sign language? What is cued speech? What is Makaton? What is sign supported English? All of these things. And we do that in a friendly group setting where families can meet each other and really share those experiences and also share their grief and their loss in a format where they can understand each other and can be they feel comfortable because it's a shared experience.
And I guess it's a journey for everybody involved, isn't it? Because it must be that kind of, I need to find out everything. I need to do this, and this, or I don't know what to do. Where do I find out all that information? So I would imagine it's of a lot of comfort to suddenly have a place that you can go that kind of just sort of gives you a chance to take a breath, and then you can say it's going to be okay. This, like I say, you can start to take them through the processes and the choices and the options and support that you've got. And I think then you can kind of take that breath and take a step back just to go, okay, so what's today? And that might be just reaching out, or it might be, like say, signing up to one of the classes or whatever it happens to be. And you know that you've got a pathway and a journey that can support you sort of ongoing.
That's right. And I think that the other really important thing is that in terms of choices, there are lots of choices, and you don't just have to make one choice. You can make several choices. So, in fact, my husband and I have a deaf daughter ourselves. She's now 22. And I really wish, looking back, that we'd had a course like that, like the choices course, because all the decisions that we were making by ourselves. And we have a supportive wider family around us, but they didn't know anything about deafness either. So it was very difficult to make some of those decisions early on, in an informed way, and without being able to really share our experiences with other people in a similar boat, really.
Yeah, and so take us a little bit into your journey then, in terms of sort of having that personal experience, but then to be able to get involved in a charity and to sort of take that personal into the professional.
Yes. So, as I say, my daughter was born 22 years ago, and it was a big shock to find out that actually she had some complex needs and life challenging needs in those early days. So, we spent a lot of time in hospital in the first few months. She had heart surgery, and she seemed to survive it all okay. And we got out of hospital. But as time went on, various things came to light. And so she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at around sort of 10 months. And then at 18 months, she was diagnosed as being profoundly deaf. So all of those things were quite a hard, difficult path to travel. But we did have a lot of support on the way. We had fabulous family around us and a lot of really good professionals too. And so, we did choose a lot of things for her in terms of her deafness. So, when she was 3 years old, she had cochlear implants. And weirdly, I really thought that they would just fix everything. She'd be able to hear and she'd learn to speak and everything would be marvelous. But actually, that wasn't the case. We needed a whole lot more than just the technology. So, yes, we learnt to sign. And we did something called sign supported English, which is a slightly different concept from BSL. So, what that is it takes British Sign Language signs and you just put them in English word order, except that there aren't signs really for grammar words. And of course, as I explained earlier, the way that sign language works is pictures. So, really, I'd hoped that we'd have English and sign language in one, but actually, we had neither. It wasn't English and it wasn't sign language either. So, when Megan went to school, she was really struggling to learn English. And that wasn't really surprising because she had signs for words, but nowhere in this sign for cat is the letters C, A, and T. So she was having to learn, okay, there's the cat, there's a picture of a cat, I'm familiar with that, but now I've got to remember that apparently CAT is also cat.
Yes.
So I've got to log that in my memory and then do the next word and then do the next word and then do the next word. And so you can't get very far like that.
Yeah, I can really sort of, yeah, I can really imagine that. Like you're saying, at a time when life is sort of bamboozling enough, isn't it? Like you say, with so many sort of changes and things. So from that experience, then did the position that you're in now, did it sort of open up in sort of in front of you, as it were, or did you sort of go sort of searching for it?
No, not really. So we started to learn to cue with Megan when she was about 7. And at the time, I was teaching music in various different schools. And when she got to the age of 13, this is our daughter Megan, I was not very happy with her secondary school provision. And so I decided then to take her out of mainstream. Well, not she wasn't in a mainstream school, she was in a special school. But I decided to take her out of that special school and to educate her at home. So by doing that, I had to give up my day job, my music teaching job, to educate her, which I did for a couple of years. And then when she decided to then go to college, I was then curious about what cued speech might have to offer in terms of a position for myself. And so, in discussion with them, we came up with this role of being a family practitioner and supporting families through the process of choosing how they were going to communicate with their child. And if they chose cued speech, that I could do that and I could teach that to them. And so that's how that started. And I've been working with them since 2017.
I see. So that really sort of fills in those pictures as well. And just because as a musician myself, do tell me what were you teaching and to what age group and what sort of things were you covering?
So I was teaching primary school age children. And what would happen would be that their class teacher would have their time to do their preparation. And I would then take the whole class and do a music lesson with them. So that involved everything from samba, composition, xylophones everywhere, recorders, you name it, cellos, violins. We'd get everything out and they would experiment with a bit of composition. We'd do a lot of singing. It was really fun. And I was really covering the music curriculum in a mainstream school. And then that led to teaching in several schools because, as you probably are aware, at the time in around sort of 2012, some small schools started to federate with other schools, and they became groups of schools. So I then travelled around our federation of schools doing that job, and so everything from singing clubs to whole school singing,
Hmm.
to the whole wider ops thing, which you're probably aware of as well, where children get to try to play the guitar, they get to try to play the trumpet, flute, violin. Yeah, lots of fun. So it was a good job. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's an amazing experience, and there are two things that strike me sort of coming from that. First of all, how does maybe some of those skills and some of that understanding help you in terms of what you're doing now? And just sort of in terms of sort of supporting people in and sort of teaching in whichever sort of form that comes. And the follow up to that would be in terms of if you've got a passion for music and love of music, how does that look with your daughter?
Hmm. Well, I'll go for the daughter bit first because actually she's involved with a signing choir called Hands in Harmony. And what that choir does is it interprets popular songs, pop songs, show tunes, and they interpret it into British Sign Language. And she absolutely loves that. It's a wonderful thing because actually she's quite a natural performer and she really gets into the songs, and it's a wonderful thing to watch her perform them. And so that's her expressive way of showing her love for music. And despite her wearing cochlear implants, which is not like natural hearing at all, she absolutely loves music. And out of my three daughters, she's the only one that will listen to Classic FM with me on the radio. And, as we listen to various things, I can cue to her what's happening. Oh, it's a symphony or a concerto or whatever, and she can begin to get some of the language around the different types of music. So
That's
it's
amazing.
it's it's actually it's a real joy to share music with her, and she's got a great playlist from everything from folk music to show tunes to classical music as well. So it's just a fantastic thing to be able to share with her. In terms of my skills as a musician, I think they have helped tremendously in learning to cue because cueing is about sounds and dexterity, and of course that fits in with a classical musician's skill for sure.
Yeah, I love the way these things cross over. It's why I'm so
Yeah.
passionate that everyone should have the experience and the understanding of what music is. It's not about taking it into your job. It's about having an understanding of it, the skill set, everything that you learn from it, and the camaraderie and the shared experience as well. It just it can transform your life in so many ways. And I was actually just really heartwarmed. One of the things I've got into in the last year or so is watching some of the NFL in American football, and Jason Kelsey has just retired from one of the teams over there, and it came up that they were talking about various things, and they were talking about the fact that he was a musician and learned some instruments in his band when he was in school, and just saying how he thought that the skills that you learn from learning an instrument and the skill set of having to practice and everything that goes along with that was
Mm.
integral to sort of him and his success and what he needed to do to become this sort of amazing sports person. And I just thought it's hearing people like that talk about music in that way, which is so important, I think, for the people who are sort of making the decisions, whether it's curriculum or opportunity and that kind of thing as well. So slightly aside, but it's sort of that sort of shared passion is always comes through.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? You know, being part of a team is a wonderful thing. And actually, this week I'm playing in a show, a local show for CATS, which is Kingsbridge Amateur Theatrical Society. They're doing Wind in the Willows, so I'm playing piano and violin for them. And you know, it is a wonderful thing to be part of a band and you know to experience other people's musicianship. And I think in a show band you often get very different backgrounds to people's musicianship. So there's the guitar player doesn't read music, for example, and you know I've been brought up to read every single note on the page. So that's just really fun, isn't it, to play together even though it looks like we've got exactly the same skill, but actually we're displaying it in a very different way.
Yeah, and I think that sort of filters back into what you were saying with that shared love of music with your daughter, because
Mm.
I think people listening who might have preconceived ideas of what those experiences might be, what is possible, can be challenged or certainly be open to the fact that the personalities come through, that the inbred skills, understanding and kind of passions, you're not going to know how that's going to come out, and you also don't know quite how it's going to look like. The same with any person, whether you're deaf or whether you're not, but understanding that maybe some of the things you thought wouldn't be possible actually are. And I think that will probably be a great comfort to people.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, you know, the whole deafness thing feels very restrictive, and particularly in terms of music. And certainly as a musician, when I found out that Megan was deaf, it was really devastating to think that she wouldn't hear the beautiful sounds that I'm so familiar with. And yet, you know, it's ironic really that she's become my daughter that enjoys music probably the most.
And I think as well, it's such an emotional thing, isn't it, and an expressive thing. And you described it so beautifully before about, that seems to be the thing that she's able to do, that expression and that ability to kind of encapsulate it in her way to be able to share and support other people within that group. I think yeah, it's such a heartwarming thing when any child has that sense of being able to be free for themselves to sort of share that. And that's essentially for me a lot of what music's all about, as well as, like I say, just the any given sound or any given instrument or anything like that. I'm
Yeah,
always
absolutely.
I'm always curious in terms, is there an education experience that you had sort of pre actually teaching within school, or a teacher or somebody that had an impact on your life, and how has that sort of maybe sort of put a certain reflection on what you do now, or certainly in terms of supporting your daughter as she's gone through school?
Oh, that's quite a lot of things to try and think about in one question. I'm not sure I can entirely answer that. I mean, in terms of thinking about teachers who influenced me, certainly I had a wonderful piano teacher at Goldsmiths University. Her name is Sally Mays. I don't think she's still with us, sadly, but she was a wonderful piano teacher. And I think that what I gleaned from her was that she believed in me, and she believed that I could play the piano and that I could improve. She she gave me self-belief, and I think that that's really really important as a life skill. And I think as a musician we can always be a little bit paranoid about our own skill set. There's always somebody who can do it better. And for me, I grew up with my dad being a professional violinist right at the top, you know, the Academy of St. Martin's in the Fields. So, you know, I was used to going to the Albert Hall. I was used to going to the Festival Hall, Wigmore Hall, wherever it was that he was playing. And so to try and sort of follow a little bit in his footsteps was quite daunting, really. And I think when you have a professional musician as a parent, you tend to feel that you're just not quite good enough. And so for me to have a piano teacher who really believed in me, I was never going to be as good as my dad or follow in his footsteps entirely. But I think what she gave me was the confidence to do what I can do.
Yeah, I really love that, and I think that's such a key thing for so many people listening. Like you say, whether it's a parental thing or whether it's just that confidence. I think as soon as you can identify that it's about you and your journey and how you show up and do that, then you can start to feel excited about what's possible. Like I say, rather than that compare and contrast, which of course
Yes.
is something which is never going to serve you well in the long term.
No,
Um,
that's right.
is there a piece of advice you've been given, or is there any advice that maybe you give your younger self now, looking back, and what might that be?
I'm not sure about what I would say to my younger self, but a piece of advice that I was given more recently, and this is completely away from music and really from cued speech, is something that's come from learning a mental health tool actually called emotional logic. Something that I learned during lockdown. And certainly it's been very, very helpful in my work with families. But the strap line for that is that your emotions are not the problem, they're part of the solution. And I think often in life we can think that our emotions are a block to moving forward. But actually, if we understand them better, they are useful. They're there to help us move on. So that's entirely different from what we've just been talking about. But I think that is so crucial in terms of facing life's challenges, is knowing that our emotions are very, very important, that they're purposeful and that they're there to help us.
I love it, and that's why I love keeping these questions in, because there are things that come up which would never be part of the conversation otherwise, and I think I can see why that would be very supportive for you in terms of the sorts of work you're doing and how it can support other people as well. But I think also there'll be people listening who suddenly go, "Oh, there's a thread there. There's a glimmer of light or something I can then go and look into further and that kind of thing." And it's certainly something I can identify with. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Is
Pleasure.
there a resource you'd like to share? And this can be anything from a video, song, book, podcast, film, but something which either you've enjoyed or that you would recommend.
Hmm, a resource. No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I had various things, I had various books that I've enjoyed over the years to answer your question because I wasn't quite expecting it to come in that form. Um, so actually, no, is the answer to your question. But in terms of books that I've enjoyed reading, um, two spring to mind, and one is called The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Actually, I don't know whether I've said his name correctly, but I think that that is an incredible novel set in Afghanistan. And it's a novel about forgiveness and how, we can do something about things that have gone wrong in the past in a positive way.
Yeah,
So
no.
that was just a book that I really, really enjoyed reading. It captivated me from the first line right
Oh
to the
yeah.
end. I didn't want it to finish.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, isn't it? And that's what we like, because that ability to someone to recommend something which they really, really identified or really, really loved, and that people can go and check out whatever, let's say, whatever the impact of that was. And of course, the acronym FIRE is really, really important for us here at Education on Fire, and by that we mean feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. What is it that strikes you when you hear those words?
You know what? I think when you work in a charity like I do, you come across these words all the time. We have parents who are an inspiration because of the way that they are handling a very difficult situation, perhaps with a child that isn't just deaf, but has other complex needs too. And so that builds in the whole thing of resilience. And I hope that as a charity, we provide empowerment to these parents who are in a very difficult situation. And I think from a personal point of view, I do find that working in a charity means that the colleagues that I work with provide this really
Mm.
all the time. And it's a wonderful environment to work in, to feel that you are inspired on a regular basis and that you can empower on a regular basis too.
I love that, and it's such a gift, isn't it? I mean, it's the sorts of conversations we have at home with our children and within our family. Just the kind of, it's not about having a job necessarily. It's not about the skills. It's not even necessarily about the qualifications. It's about how you want to share your life with other people, and however that comes about, and all of those other things that you need to make that happen are incredibly important. But
Mm.
as you so brilliantly put it there, you know, to be able to share those things, be inspired by people, and be part of something which is supporting people in whatever that field happens to be. I think it's a reason to get up and a reason that you feel like you've made the most of your day on any given day. So, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing all about the charity. It's been a wonderful hearing the stories and how you're able to support people. And please do tell people where they can go and find out more information.
So please visit our website on www.deafchoicesuk.com, and please email in and we can visit you. We can chat on the phone, we can meet online, and really help you on your journey with your deaf child.
Fantastic. Kathy, thank you so much indeed for joining us today.
Pleasure.
I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and thank you so much for being part of the Education on Fire community. Links and details of today's podcast are in the description, and if you would like to support the show with a small donation, that's a wonderful way to help me bring you more creative and inspiring learning. Please visit educationonfire.com/support, and remember, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.